On March 31, 1922, a new maid arrived at a small Bavarian farmstead called Hinterkaifeck. Her name was Maria Baumgartner. She was 44 years old. Maria would not live to see the sun rise. By the following morning, 6 people lay dead across the farm. 4 of them were stacked in the barn, the other 2 were inside the house. The killer had used a mattock, a tool meant for digging. They had used it on every victim, including a 7-year-old girl and a 2-year-old boy. What happened at Hinterkaifeck is still unsolved, over a century later, but here's what investigators know, and it starts before the murders, in the attic, with sounds no one could explain. The farm belonged to Andreas Gruber, who was 63, and his wife Cecilia, who was 72. Living with them was their widowed daughter Victoria Gabriel, who was 35, and her 2 children Cecilia, 7, and Josef, 2. The Grubers kept to themselves. They worked the land, they attended church. Nothing about them invited attention, but in the months before the murders, something was wrong. Krikensa Rieger, the family's previous maid, had quit 6 months earlier. When asked why, she said she heard noises in the attic such as footsteps and movement. She believed the house was haunted. She refused to return. Andreas Gruber dismissed it. But then, in March of 1922, he found a newspaper from Munich on the property that he hadn't bought. No one nearby subscribed to it. Days before the killings, Andreas told neighbors he'd found footprints in fresh snow leading from the forest to the door of the farm. The lock was broken. The footprints led only one way toward the house. That same night, the family heard footsteps in the attic. Andreas searched it but didn't find anything. He told several neighbors about these incidents, but he refused offers of help. He never reported any of it to the police. The clock was already running. On the afternoon of Friday, March 31st, Maria Baumgartner arrived for her first day of work. It was sometime late that evening, after it had already gotten dark, that the attack began. Investigators believe the killer first moved through the barn. They may have used the noise of restless animals to draw the family outside. One by one, Andreas, Cecilia, Victoria, and young Cecilia Gabriel were led or lured into the barn. One by one, they were killed. The weapon was a mattock, a tool the family owned and kept on the property. Each victim was struck in the head. The blows were precise and fatal. The killer then entered the living quarters. Inside, they found 2-year-old Josef sleeping in his bassinet and Maria Baumgartner, the new maid, in her bedchamber. Both were killed the same way. When the police later examined the bodies, the autopsies revealed something that remains difficult to read. The younger Cecilia, at just 7 years old, had been alive for several hours after the attack. She had been lying in the straw, alone. The other victims likely died instantly. The mattock was later found hidden in the loft of the barn, with dried blood still on it. Here's what they don't tell you in most retellings. After the murders, the killer didn't flee. They stayed at Hinterkaifeck for 3 full days. During that time, the farm appeared almost normal on the surface. The chimney smoked, the cattle were fed, the watchdog remained unharmed. But inside, 6 bodies lay where they had fallen, and the killer was living among them. They ate the family's food, they consumed the entire supply of bread from the kitchen, and they cut meat from the pantry. They used the fireplace. The first sign something was wrong came on Saturday, April 1st. Coffee sellers arrived to take an order. No one answered the door. They waited, walked around the yard, didn't find anyone, and left. On Sunday, the family missed church. Victoria was in the choir and her absence was noted, but no one investigated. On Monday, the young Cecilia missed school again. Mail for the family began piling up at the post office. On Tuesday, April 4th, a local mechanic named Albert Hoffner arrived to repair an engine. He waited for an hour. No one appeared. He completed his repair alone, worked for 4.5 hours, and left. No one had checked on them. Around 3:30 in the afternoon, a neighbor named Lorenz Schlittenbauer sent his son and stepson to the farm. They returned saying no one was there. Then Schlittenbauer went himself accompanied by 2 other neighbors, Michael Pohl and Jacob Siegel. When they entered the barn, they found it. 4 bodies, covered with hay, Andreas, Cecilia the elder, Victoria, and young Cecilia. Inside the house, they found Josef dead in his bassinet, his body covered with one of his mother's dresses, and Maria Baumgartner in her bedchamber, her body covered with her own bedsheets. The murderer had not yet been found. The crime scene was immediately contaminated. Onlookers moved through the house, moved the bodies, cooked meals in the kitchen, and compromised the investigation before it had even properly begun. But one detail survived the chaos. There were footprints left in pristine snow. They lead from the forest to the farmhouse door, going in only one direction. The world is full of dark and disturbing tales of terrifying humans. It'd be a shame to miss out, so please like and subscribe and stay close. The investigation was taken on by Inspector Georg Reingruber from Munich. The motive wasn't robbery. A large sum of money was found untouched in the house. Nothing of value was missing. The question became, who would do this? Who would kill 6 people, then live in the house with their bodies for days, eating their food and tending their livestock as if waiting? Several witnesses reported seeing a man near the forest on the night of the murders. A farmer named Simon Reblonder said he saw 2 figures standing at the edge of the woods around 3 in the morning. When they saw him, they turned away deliberately to obscure their face from being seen. The following night, a craftsman named Michael Plokel passed by the farm and saw smoke from the chimney. Someone called out to him in a voice he didn't recognize. He hurried on. Suspicion eventually settled on several men. The first was Karl Gabriel, Victoria's husband. He'd been reported killed in France during World War I, but his body was never recovered. In the years after the murders, some claim to have seen him alive. The next was Lorenz Schlittenbauer, the neighbor who led the search party. He'd been Victoria's lover. He'd fathered her son Josef. He'd been involved in criminal complaints against Andreas Gruber for incest. He entered the crime scene before police, moved through the barn and handled evidence. Was he searching, or was he covering something? Next was the Gump brothers, known criminals in the region. Andreas S. and Karl S. were drifters with records of violence. None of them were ever convicted. The investigation eventually exhausted itself. The last interrogations took place in 1986, 64 years after the crime. The case was officially closed in 1955 and was left unsolved. Let's look at what the evidence actually tells us. Someone had been living in the attic before the murders. The former maid heard footsteps. The family heard footsteps. Andreas found a stranger's newspaper in his home. Someone had broken the lock on the machine room door. Someone had walked from the forest to the farm and not walked back, or at least not through the snow. Someone knew the family's routines well enough to kill 6 people without alarming the neighbors. Someone knew where the mattock was kept. And then someone fed the animals, stoked the fire, cut meat from the pantry, and lived among the dead. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This was either an act of profound rage directed at the Gruber family specifically, or an act of something colder. Perhaps it was someone who killed because they wanted to occupy that house. Perhaps it was someone who wanted to be there. The attic wasn't haunted. Someone was living up there, waiting. And when they decided to come down, 6 people died. The farm at Hinterkaifeck was demolished less than a year after the murders. Authorities wanted to erase it. They tore down the barn, the house, and the machine room. During demolition, more evidence was found in the attic. They found the mattock covered in dried blood and a penknife hidden in the hay. It was too late. The killer, whoever they were, was already gone. A small concrete memorial now stands where the farm once was. It carries the names of the 6 victims. A reminder, the Hinterkaifeck murders remain one of the oldest unsolved mass killings in German history. It's been over 100 years with dozens of suspects and no answers. The monsters were never imaginary. They just knew how to wait.